Well, lots of things been going on in the world of Indianapolis municipalities, whether it's property taxes, whether it's data centers, whether it's Lowits, whether it's Coits, or just it, you name it. So joining us via Zoom is our good friend, Matt Greller. So Matthew, my friend, how's it going? How's your summer been treating you so far?
Well, pretty low key, Abdul. Not much happening out there. It's been very relaxing. No real issues to deal with. No municipal finance issues. No gas tax issues. Nothing of that sort. I kid, of course. It's been very busy. A lot of unknowns circulating around municipal government these days that we want to try to get answers to. On top of the storms a lot of our members have been experiencing the last couple of days and the response to those, trying to help in that space as well.
Well, let's start with the big news this week. Obviously, was the rough weather that went through uh, northwestern Indiana, my hometown of Chicago. Uh,
Yep.
I remind folks that this is the job of local governments, so those first responders. How have things been going up there? Have you spoken to any mayors yet, or heard anything from folks in that neck of the woods?
Yeah, it's been good to see everybody and hear from everybody. There is a lot of damage. 100-mile-an-hour winds were recorded in various communities up in the northwest corner of the state a couple days ago. As you can imagine, tons of debris, trees down, lots of power outages. I think NIPSCO, in fact, reported that it was the largest outage event they've had in their history. Have still a lot of communities with significant power outages throughout their communities, et cetera. But I guess the good thing we're hearing is, we have folks as far south as Washington, Indiana, sending electrical crews up north to help restore power. So we've put the word out for folks if they need help to ask their brothers and sisters in other areas of the state that were not impacted. And of course, everybody's been more than willing to send what resources they have. So that's been good. And then, of course, yesterday, the torrential rain out in east central Indiana and the Cambridge City area, out there, Newcastle area, Richmond area, 17 plus inches of rain, significant catastrophic flooding. I think I-70 is still closed as we record this, Abdul. So lots of things to deal with. And I think it just, again, puts in front of everyone how important the services that your cities and towns and local governments provide are to daily life. And when there's an interruption, how important it is that they are there and have the resources they need to get things back up and running.
Well, I thought it was interesting. Like I said, we didn't have the high winds here, but we did have the torrential rain here on the west side of Indianapolis. I told my lovely wife, it's like, honey, I think we may need to start building an ark, or maybe it's like, no, dear, it's too late for you. So, like, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Least of concerns for those up north and experiencing the flooding. I'll definitely have to hire a farmer or somebody to come and bail my yard. That's my only issue right now. So no big issue for us.
Just plant rice. You'll be fine.
There you go.
So Matt, I do think you do bring an interesting point. We're all kidding aside here. I think these whether there's flooding in central Indiana, the winds, the high winds, and damage up in northern Indiana. I think it's once again it's a reminder, folks, just how important those services are. And so we start messing with the funding mechanism. We need to realize that, hey, nothing operates in a vacuum here.
Exactly. I mean, I get it. Folks don't like to write that check for property taxes, but the dollars go to very important things. Those things cost money to provide. They're a heck of a lot more expensive than they were just a couple of years ago. Anything from millions of dollars for a new fire truck to having to pay employees higher wages because of inflationary and competitive reasons. So, yeah, it's really important that we have that revenue in place and that we can depend on where it's coming from and we know it's going to arrive so that we can be ready and able to respond in situations like this.
Matt Greller, Accelerating Indiana Municipalities, the good folks at AIM. Talk about the state of local government these days here in Indiana. Matt, big news item this week has been the wheel tax. Here in Indianapolis, the council passed the wheel tax. The mayor vetoed it. That veto was overridden. I know in other municipalities, like let's say Zionsville, other places they've been dealing with the wheel tax. How has the wheel tax been received in and around the state of Indiana by municipalities?
Yeah, I'll back up just a little bit, Abdul. A few years ago, well, we've had this ability for cities and towns above 5,000 population to pass their own wheel tax for close to a decade now, maybe a little longer. The reason you're hearing so much more about it now is some changes that the legislature made that incentivizes really local governments to pass a wheel tax and receive a new distribution of money from what's called a lane miles distribution formula. So every community that passes a wheel tax, on top of the money they get regularly from the gas tax, would receive a new level of funding based on the lane miles they take care of in their individual communities. So a lot of communities have done the math and run the numbers to determine whether or not it makes financial sense for them to pass it. Of course, they have to take into account community reaction, et cetera, in a time where everybody's paying more for everything, it seems. I think a lot of our town councils, mayors, et cetera, out there have taken that notion very seriously and really thought about whether or not a wheel tax makes sense. A number have moved forward with that, thinking that it is a way to make sure our infrastructure in cities and towns is where it needs to be. And we've tried to support them and provide them with data and things like that and making those decisions. Of course, in Central Indiana, as you mentioned, the big point of discussion has been the city council overriding the mayor's veto, and I don't pretend to know all the ins and outs of the politics that go on between those two factions. But at the end of the day, I think what we want is an opportunity to consider things like this and make the best decisions locally, and we'll let the chips fall where they may.
I think it's also interesting too, because in addition to gas taxes and wheel taxes, and we'll get to the gas taxes, but there are also a lot of referendums on the ballot as well for local schools. And something I wrote in my weblog a while back, referendums aren't so much about taxes as they are about relationships and what relationship does, the school board, the school district have with his parents. And also ties to the other thing is, I would argue, my friend, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. People don't mind paying taxes as long as they think they're getting their money's worth.
Yeah, I think that's probably true for everybody. We see it often. We don't have the ability to do referenda at the city or town level like the schools do. But I see this all the time, whether it's, a community that's looking at a rate increase for water or sewer. Those that get out and explain, why. Well, we have this mandate from the Environmental Protection Agency that we have to treat stormwater in a different way, and we have to treat combined sewer in a different way, or whatever it might be. When you get out and explain, we've got this new development coming into the city, and we've got to run an 8-inch water line out to it, and this is why the rates are going to go up a little bit. But on the back end, it's going to improve our tax base and provide more flexibility in how we run the community going forward. So we see that all the time, folks being able to explain that and understand it to their citizens that they represent. Oftentimes, you're right. I think folks do understand the why behind it, and certainly can maybe not support, but certainly understand where a community is heading and why. So I'm going to be fascinated to watch the outcome of these referenda in the fall and see where the general public is. It'll be a good barometer, I think, of where they rank importance of local government funding. Oftentimes we don't consider schools to be a part of local government. I would argue they're one of the tenets of quality of place in a community. If you don't have good schools, you can't really build a good community. So we'll be really interested to see how all that turns out, and probably will have broad policy implications one way or the other once the legislature reconvenes in January.
Our guest in the program today is Matt Greller. Matt, the head of Accelerating Indiana Municipalities, formerly known as Cities and Towns. Talk about local government this day and age, all the issues that local governments have been facing and have been dealing with. Speaking of local governments, my friend, data centers.
Yep.
you laugh, but it's like I said before. Everybody loves the data, but nobody wants the data center. But the picture of my dog playing the piano and running around the backyard, it's got to go somewhere. So,
yeah.
How has the data center discussion gone in Indiana?
Well, it's been massive around the state. I think, ironically, just this morning, Abdul, I will say this: I got a call from a representative with Amazon asking how they could help in the flood ravaged areas of the state, wind ravaged areas of the state. So it's more than them just taking up farmland and those kinds of things. I think they do offer positive community impacts as well, and that's just a small example of one. what we've seen at the city or town level is not really any different than what you hear, whether it's here in Indianapolis and Marion County or other areas of the state. People are very divided on the issue. I will say that it's becoming apparent from an economic development standpoint that data centers offer a tremendous value from a monetary standpoint to local governments in certain circumstances. They're not all the same. Some are big, some are small. Some use closed loop water systems, some don't. All kinds of different scenarios play into that. But where we've seen really good success, up north, I know of a smaller data center that went into a brownfield, an old industrial building that was not being used. To me, that seems like a really positive use. You see in southern Indiana, I think it's Google has a massive data center where they're looking to partner with a small town that's going to be providing the utilities and help them repair their sewer infrastructure. So lots of those kinds of stories around the state. And how do you balance that with the impacts that citizens perceive, whether accurate or false? So I think that's where we're going to spend a lot of our efforts in the coming months, is just from an education standpoint. As you enter into the debate, know all the facts, I think will be our charge. In fact, we're having a session just next week on data centers, and look forward to see where that takes us and what our future work looks like. But it's certainly a hot topic. They're obviously much bigger and have a bigger footprint, but I almost equate it to, the big 300-foot cell towers that we had at the beginning of the cell service deployment throughout the country. Everyone thought that those were going to cause, brain cancer, emit radio waves that were going to be damaging to our pets or whatnot. I don't mean to make light of it, but that turned out not to be the case. And I'm hopeful that maybe we can get to a point there with data centers as well.
And it's interesting too, because like I told someone before, data centers don't bother me as long as they're zoned properly, not give away the whole store to get the data center in a particular place. But I want to say one of the things that doesn't necessarily come to mind when we talk about the data center is, in a world of property tax restraints and less money from the residential side, the data center, if the deal is structured correctly, can absorb a lot of that property tax value or a lot of those property tax liabilities. So
Yep.
The residents and the home down the street don't necessarily have to foot the bill anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Hobart, Indiana has a data center project being built right now, massive, transformational project for the city, significant revenue back to the community from this data center. Will be transformational in all respects. So not everybody's going to get one that's like that, but there are certainly opportunities out there that you can diversify revenue streams, take some of the pressure off property tax, maybe not have to use income tax to the level that you were once considering. So I'm anxious to see how all this looks 4, 5, 6 years down the road and where we stand. If you believe Elon, data centers are going to be floating around in space at some point in the not so distant future. So this could be a short-lived phenomenon here in Indiana and around the country, but certainly an interesting policy discussion without question.
Matt Greller with us on the program today, just getting caught up on the issues facing local governments. Matt, on one of the last points in the whole data center debate, it's interesting about the big cell tower debate back in the early 2000s. Cell towers are going up. But obviously, over time, like any technology, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and much more efficient. So sometimes I just kind of wonder, as we have the debate, are we getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because the data center of, say, maybe 2035 will be a whole lot smaller than the data center of 2025?
Well, if history is accurate, tells us a story, that certainly will likely be the case. So that's a good point to. We probably have a finite period of time where we're going to be dealing with data centers as we know them today and the impacts. So I hope we can all just take a holistic approach to this and look at it from a long-term perspective. And, if it doesn't make sense in one area of the state, that's fine. Maybe we move to the next area where it does. So lots more to go there, but certainly one that's keeping us all on our toes and creating a whole new set of other issues around community engagement, open door meetings, et cetera. We'll have to probably have some impacts there as well on down the road.
Speaking of data centers, I know one of the big issues with data centers has been the whole issue of AI, artificial intelligence, whether it's chat Claude, you name it. I use them all because they make my world a lot more productive. But how has AI impacted, are we starting to see AI impact city and local governments?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you probably use it just like I do in daily work every single day, to be honest, at this point. We're seeing it, I think, in terms of transportation management. Last winter, I know of at least one story where a street department was using AI to help identify where to go first when a big snowstorm hit. They mapped out the route rather than multiple people taking multiple hours to route everybody and all the trucks in the right place. AI did it in a matter of seconds and probably better than individuals could have done. But you still need the human component of that to input the necessary information in. So without question, it's just going to continue to explode. I think you'll see it enter into financial discussions. I think you'll see it enter into economic development discussions. Fascinating and scary all at the same time, probably is the best way to wrap it up.
Well, like I said, until AI starts building robots to go back in time to kill a young Abdul-Hakim Shabazz and save Indiana from a whole bunch of unnecessary grief and hassle, I think we're all just fine, my friend. I really do.
I do too.
But then again, also, this is going to sound really bad, and I know we're supposed to have a serious interview, but I always going to say this is why the plot in Terminator doesn't work, because if I had to build a robot to go back in time to kill John Connor, the fact that building a robot shows it didn't work. But then again, that's a whole other thing for a whole other time. I'm just being a total science fiction dork, so I apologize for that.
All good. I like it.
My friend. Matt Greller with us on the program today. Matt, the head of Accelerated Indiana Municipalities. Those are the folks who represent Indiana cities and towns across the state. And so we're just getting caught up on lots of things, whether it's wheel taxes, whether it's data centers. Matt, let's change gears a little bit, talk about economic development and sort of the transparency related issues, because you've got folks trying to negotiate deals, but you don't want to put everything out in the street. But at the same time, you got you talk about the taxpayer dollars and the public's right to know. How has that been balanced, or how do you folks in the municipality world figured out a balance and all that yet?
Well, the data centers are probably a good example of that question, Abdul. You have to balance the cone of silence, for lack of a better term. We can't talk about certain things and certain circumstances with certain companies, et cetera, with the public's ability to know. That'll never change. That's always going to be a hard and fine line to walk and make sure that everything's getting done in the right way. In terms of economic development, generally speaking right now, Abdul, I would say a degree of uncertainty. We don't have a great understanding of where our revenue structure will be headed in the next few years, and that, I'm afraid, is going to have an impact on economic development. And what does that mean going forward? What's our incentive package structure going to look like? How do we make sure that we can hold true to the promises we make if we don't know what our future looks like from a financial standpoint? So I do have a pretty strong concern about that and where we head going forward until we get some of these uncertainties answered.
Now, Matt, we talk about the economic forecast. We talk about the incentive package. You're talking about whether it's going to be property taxes or income taxes or sales taxes. Walk into that a little bit more. Let's dig a little bit deeper for our audience, if you could.
On whether we think, what's the question again? Sorry, Abdul. I'm not sure I'm following you on that one.
Oh no, I didn't explain it the best way. When you talk about sort of the financial picture with respect to economic development, are we talking about incentive packages, or talking about property taxes? What exactly does that mean, I guess?
So right now, the way we operate in cities and towns, about anywhere from 45 to upwards of 70% of local government revenue comes from property taxes. The rest comes from income tax, and then you have some ancillary revenues like the gas tax and things like that. But the bulk of our revenue comes from property and income tax. So with both of those right now, there is a great deal of uncertainty about what they look like going forward. We're in the first year of implementing a bill that passed 2 years ago, which is now referred to as Senate Enrolled Act 1, that is going to make some modifications to the revenue that we receive from property taxes. You probably saw in your property tax bill this year, Abdul, a $300 credit at the bottom of the bill. That has to come from somewhere. And typically, almost without question, comes from local government, schools, et cetera. So those reductions in revenue, and there are more on the way. There are new exemptions for certain classes of property taxpayers. There are new deductions coming online, et cetera, that we'll have to factor into the equation. So that's sort of phase one. But then phase two is this real unknown. There's a lot of discussion around not only Indiana, but the nation in general about property taxes and where they're headed. You have Representative Prescott, who is proposing pretty much a full elimination of property taxes and replacing that with an expansion of the sales tax onto services. We can talk about that later, too. You've got other plans within the General Assembly. The governor has talked about an interest in eliminating property taxes for those over a certain age or for those that have fully paid off their mortgage. Chairman Thompson of the House Ways and Means Committee is talking about a very complicated system called a rate cap system, and very complex to get into, but would also result in some people losing lots of property tax revenue, some receiving more capacity from the property tax standpoint. So you've got all these different conversations happening. You've got the national narrative that property taxes are horrible. And even though
that's how the government, even though that's how we paid for the government back in the 1700s, it was
ancient Rome used property taxes to pay for its government. So it's been around for a long, long time, and now we're looking at significant changes. Some policymakers are even referring to property taxes being immoral, and we have that kind of argument. Folks saying that you never own your home if you have to actually pay property taxes. We think that is a little bit far-fetched. Property taxes are easily tied back to a service. They pay for a firefighter's turnout gear. They pay for a paver that fixes potholes in the winter and springtime, et cetera. So just a great deal of uncertainty, and it makes it very difficult to do capital planning. It makes it very difficult to pursue aggressively certain types of economic development projects because you're often abating certain property taxes that go into those deals. So long story short, that is a great deal of uncertainty. And then this is all very complicated, but you layer on top of that income taxes. We all pay income taxes in the state of Indiana. We pay a state income tax, and all of us now pay in all 92 counties a local income tax. That system is changing. That was also in Senate Rule Act 1 a couple of years ago. Some real changes have occurred here in terms of how the tax will be administered and collected and then distributed back to the underlying units of local government. We're shifting to a situation where counties have a lot more say in that process. So our membership is worried about, will their county work with them to make sure that they're receiving close to the same level of revenue they receive today? In at least 70 of our communities, that is not the case. They'll be receiving far less without the county intervening and making some changes. So all those things together make for a very uncertain fiscal outlook for cities and towns, and makes it, like I've said now repeatedly, very difficult to plan for the future and really focus on economic development.
And by the way, it's interesting you brought that up, Matt, because while you were talking, it dawned on me that the one thing about property taxes is they stay in the community where they're levied, where they're raised. When we start getting into income taxes and sales taxes, and I remember asking Representative Prescott this question here. I was like, hey, JD, help me out here. If you get rid of property taxes and you switch to a sales tax, where does the sales tax get spent? Does it get spent in the county where it's raised, or does it get spent in the county where the person lives? Because if I know you're in Johnson County, I'm in Marion County, but you come to Marion County every day to go to work. So when Matt Greller spends XYZ dollars at TJ Maxx right across the street from his job, does the sales tax stay at Marion County, or does it follow Matt back to Johnson County?
Well, and that's a question that will probably be debated at length this coming legislative session, I would have to imagine that. And I picked on Representative Prescott a little bit. I should also add, he is at least recognizing that there is a need for services from a local level and that they do need to be funded. We've got concerns with how his plan would work, but I do appreciate him at least acknowledging that we do have to fund local government and provide we have to provide those services back to the constituents.
Oh yeah, and I only picked him because I actually went to a couple of his town halls. He had one up here in Pike Township.
Yeah, he's been
So
everywhere.
yeah, yes, like the Johnny Cash song. So when you bring this up, these sort of unintended consequences, do lawmakers fully understand or fully appreciate, or regular folks for that matter? It's not just so much a matter of flipping a button and the taxes go away. It's all interconnected.
Legislators are in a really tough spot when it comes to this debate. We pay property taxes in Indiana twice a year if you own your home and don't escrow your mortgages. So you're physically seeing that check written, and it makes an impact. It's not an insignificant amount of money, and so legislators are hearing from folks that do that twice a year, and I get it. They're under a ton of pressure to make some changes. The challenge is that the system is so complex that you move any part of it, it has downstream impacts that most, say for maybe 4 or 5 people in the entire state, can fully understand and model out. And that's the challenge. So when you're trying to talk to a legislator about those kinds of impacts, that's where we have to become very clear, very succinct, because it is a very, very complex system. And it's very difficult to understand, and we do understand that legislators are under tremendous pressure to make things better or different from their constituents' eyes.
Matt Greller, Accelerate Indiana Municipalities, with us for a few more minutes on the program today, just getting caught up on all the issues that have been faced local government so far this year, and looking ahead to next year as well. Matt, something the governor recently did was suspend the gas tax. Did it a couple times under state statute. Then it did a third sort of sales tax suspension. There was some questions about the legalities and whether the governor actually had the authority to do that. But the thing is, once again, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. This is money that usually gets sent back down to local governments. I know you folks are kind of covered for the first 2 sales tax suspensions. Anything on the third sales tax suspension yet?
Yeah, the governor's team, I will say, I'll leave the legal debate to lawyers like you, Abdul, and let you all figure that out. The governor has been very good in saying and been delivering on replacing that lost revenue. He's pro-infrastructure. He understands the importance of infrastructure, and having that money replaced has been very good. We've also been told that this third round will be replaced in the same way the first 2 were. So it looks like local governments will be made whole from that standpoint. The governor's making a policy decision that, from an affordability standpoint, he thinks that the gas tax is helping constituents, and that's his job. Understand that, but really appreciate using some of the money the state's been able to save over the last 18 months to backfill those dollars that are, as you mentioned, Abdul, critically important to funding local roads and streets.
Matt, so like I said, we get ready to wind down. I want to, let's say, change gears a little bit and look at sort of the quality of life wheel spoke in the economic development pie, because it used to be, we built a factory, we built a road, we built a bridge, we put sewer lines in, but now I was told that in the economic development world, folks are looking at quality of life type issues. They're looking at parks, looking at trails, and so those recreational things. So if I want my employees to live here, I want them to be happy while they're here.
Yep. You could not have asked a better closing question to bring all this together, Abdul. You're exactly right. Companies are following the talent. The talent is people. The people are choosing where they want to live even before they have a job. That's been I think a mantra that's been accepted now for probably better part of a decade, if not longer. Indiana, over the last 10, 12 years, has done a fantastic job of trying to capitalize on that. I can't tell you how many calls I got from colleagues in other states around the country about what was regional cities and then became READY program focusing on quality of life type projects. You're seeing it all across the state. We've made some great strides in that over the last decade or so. We've seen population increase in areas that haven't seen population increases forever, reversing downward spiral trends that have been fantastic, especially in rural parts of the state that have been stagnant or declining for 20, 30, 40, 50 years in some instances. All of this conversation about changing the financial structure of local government has a direct impact on our ability to build quality places, build quality communities, focus on quality of life type projects. And that is my number one concern, that we will undo all the good we've done for the last 10, 12 years because of these discussions, maybe by nobody's direct intention, of course, but without certainty in our revenue structure. We have to make sure the police and fire are paid. We have to make sure they have the equipment they need to do their jobs. We have to make sure our utilities are operating. But once you get beyond those things and start focusing on quality of place type projects that really drive folks into a community, that's where I worry that we're going to be without a up the creek without a paddle, if you will, in terms of being able to continue that momentum. Now, certainly some places will be able to do so, but overall, from a statewide perspective, the number one concern that I have and that we have as an organization of how we're going to make that a reality going forward in this new funding structure that we're likely to have.
Matt, well, before let's go here, one last thing. What do you say to those folks who say, well, local governments, they got plenty of money. They could just do cuts. They can cut here, cut here. They don't need this. They don't need this. They're just afraid to cut. They just want our tax dollars to spend as their own little private playgrounds.
That is an easy way to talk about things for somebody that doesn't have a good understanding of local government. I'm not sure there's a mayor in the state, a city council, a town council, a clerk treasurer in the entire state that wouldn't sit down with somebody and say, show me where is the fluff? Where is the fat? Where do we need to cut? Where can we cut? I just don't see it. I think it's an easy answer for those that are uninformed about the true workings of local government.
All right. Well, our guest on the program today has been our good friend, Matt Greller. Matt is the head of the Accelerated Indiana Municipalities. Good conversation, a long overdue conversation, by the way, my friend. We haven't chatted in a while. No, always good to chat with you. Thank you very much for being with us, and we'll talk again between now and the end of the year.
Good deal. Thanks, Abdul.